years. Those who look to him are radiant, their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him.
Someone hit the lights. Awesome. Oh, there we are. For those of you who don't have seats in the back, there's plenty of wonderful ones down here. We put you like really far back so I don't spit on anybody, because that would be bad. Oh my gosh.
Hello. I'm telling you guys, you should all become youth pastors, because then you can stand up here and breathe, you know. It's a good time. Hello, everybody. How are you all doing tonight? Noah, Nathan is very excited. Anyone else? How are you guys doing tonight? Woo! Goodness, y'all are already dead. I can tell. Like, school is back, and that's not fun or anything. And so, how is school going? How many of you guys are all virtual? Like completely virtual, entirely online? Oof. How many of you guys are actually in person some? Oh, wow. He lives out in like Pumpkin Land, like way out in the middle of nowhere, where they don't have COVID out there. It hasn't reached them yet. They're like 10 years behind the normal world. Well, it's good to see you guys in person. What is going on with this cord? Hold up one sec. Hi, Becky. That was awesome. Well, it is good to see you guys. How many of you are actually getting to play sports? Like, kinda is happening? Okay. So several of you are. The what now? Yeah, the people at home. How many of you are homeschooled? Yeah! Woo! It's like, if someone in your school gets COVID, then it's real bad for you because they live with you. Well, it's cool to see you guys actually in person. I'm so excited that we get to hang out with you high schoolers. This is awesome and super cool. Tonight, we're going to be starting a new series that we're calling All In. You should see it in a beautiful graphic behind me. Can you guys actually see what's going on the screen at all? Yes? Nods through the mask. You guys got to be real visual with me because of the masks and stuff. Like, you can't just be like, it have to be like a whole head thing. You know what I'm saying? Okay, cool. I might actually make slides next week. Who knows? We'll see if I'm feeling up to it. But we're starting this new series that we're calling All In. And Ryan and I are actually kind of going to be doing this for middle school and high school. It's going to look a little different for each group. But we're both going to be doing this same series and talking about what does it look like. Is this going out? Do I just like hold it real tight with both hands? Okay, I'm going to talk like this for the rest of the night, just right here without moving. But we're starting this series called All In, and we're asking the question, okay, what does it mean to be all in with our faith? Right? So I think a lot of us, we've heard that phrase, right? How many of you have kind of talked about that maybe before? Like, I want to be all in for Jesus. Like, I want to figure my faith out. Okay, like 3 of you. That's good. Meaningful conversations are being had. But what does it look like, actually, how do we be all in our faith? And so week 1, you might see in the little tag in the corner, we're kind of talking about what does it look like to actually get off the sidelines of our faith. So those of you who are in sports, I was having a conversation about this message tonight with my wife earlier today, and she was talking about her career in basketball when she was about y'all's age. It was a career that I'm sure was incredible. Thousands of people filled the stands to watch her play. It was amazing, and she was talking about what it meant for her to get off the sidelines. And how when her team is doing really well and you can have confidence in your team and you're excited about the game, it's easy to get off the sidelines and get onto the court or the field and play. But when it's really not going well and things are awful and you're losing by a lot, you kind of just want to sit there and drink Gatorade, and like you don't want to be out there. Nathan's nodding his head like, yes, I'm usually drinking Gatorade. I'm kidding, I'm sorry that hurt. But anyway, so we're going to be looking at what does it look like to get off the sidelines of faith. And I think that there are maybe 3 things that sometimes we wrestle with, right? Maybe one of the reasons we're not getting off the sidelines of our faith is apathy. Right? It's like, okay, I want to be all in for my faith. I want to be all in for Jesus, but I'm having a hard time really wanting to. You know, like I'm good where I'm at. You know, like I kind of am just floating through life. I'm not really interested in pushing like that. That sounds like a lot. Or maybe it's we feel incapable. It's like I want to be all in for my faith. I want to be excited about God, but I don't know if I'm cool enough or interesting enough or extroverted enough to go and talk to people and tell them about what I believe and have conversations with them. Like, I don't know if God's going to really use me in that way. I don't feel like I'm quite ready for that. Or maybe it's just simply not feeling like we have the strength or the energy or the discipline to do it. It's like, like my faith is right here and Netflix is over here. And Netflix has all my favorite shows on it, and I'm watching Parks and Rec right now, and this is a good time, and that seems like a lot of work. And so it's this balance back and forth of like, how do we make a decision to get off the sidelines and be all in with our faith? And so tonight we're going to be asking ourselves that question, why can we get off the sidelines? And to do that, we're going to be looking at a very famous story in the Bible. How many of y'all know who my boy Moses is? Most of you guys know who Moses is. Okay, so Moses is a dude way back early in the Bible. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and then Exodus. Moses literally starts Exodus. Like Exodus begins, and then it's just Moses right there. And so Moses is hanging out, and his life starts in a weird way. You see, the people of Israel, God's chosen people, they're not in Israel when Moses is born. They're in Egypt. How many of y'all know where Egypt is? Some of you passed geography, that's good. Okay, so Egypt is in Africa. It's in like the northeast corner right there by the Middle East. And so the people of Israel are living in Egypt. They have been living in Egypt for a long time. Scholars tell us there was somewhere between 1 and 2 million Israelites living in Egypt at the time. That's a lot of people. That's a whole lot more people than live in Rochester. And so the Israelites are hanging out there, and they begin to grow, and there's so many of them that the Egyptian people get scared, and so they enslave the Israelite people, and they're starting to make them work and build things, and they're kind of controlling their population. Many scholars think this might even have been part of the time in history when things like the pyramids were being built in Egypt. Crazy stuff is happening. And so a Pharaoh comes up, and he's like kind of like king of Egypt, and he decides in order to control the Israelites, he's going to kill off all of the brand new baby boys that are born. Super evil dude. And so he sets out this decree, and all the Israelites are having their baby boys taken away from them and killed. But Moses' parents are like, nah. And so they grab their little baby and they hide him for like 3 months. Okay, and they've got him for 3 months. They're hidden. Maybe he's in a closet somewhere. I don't know. But they're hiding Moses. And then Moses' mom does what any reasonable mother would do. And she makes a basket out of leaves. And she puts Moses in the river and floats him away. Because that will keep him safe. And so thankfully, though, none of the alligators or crocodiles. I'm not sure what's in Egypt. One of the two, I'm sure. Crocodiles, thank you. We have a biology expert over there. And so crocodiles don't eat him, and he floats to none other than the palace. And the princess of Egypt, Pharaoh's daughter, comes down to the water, and she's like, oh, cool, a baby, this is normal. And she picks the baby up out of the water with no questions asked and says, I'm going to keep him. And who does she recruit to take care of Moses while he's still a little baby? Oh, what was that? Oh, a bubble. Well, he's still a little bubble of a baby. While he's still a little baby, Moses' own biological mother. She volunteers. She's like, oh, I'll take care of that baby for you if you want. It wouldn't be any big deal. You know, I could do it. And she's like, great, that sounds like a plan. Here you go. And she gives Moses back to his mom. And so Moses' mom gets to take care of Moses until he's kind of done nursing and all that stuff, and then he gets returned to the palace. And so Moses grows up in Egypt in Pharaoh's house. He's, kind of a big deal. And then as he's grown, he's a grown man at this point. He's wandering around Egypt, and he sees how Israelites, he knows that they're his people from when he was born. He sees how they're being oppressed by the Egyptians. And he actually watches a kind of like one of the slave guards beating one of the Israelites. And he looks right and he looks left and he doesn't see anybody. And so he kills the dude and buries him in the sand. That's a true story. He literally hides him in the sand. And then Moses is thinking, no one saw that. It was a perfect crime. Nobody can dig in sand. And so he goes out, the next day, and he sees two Israelites who are fighting each other. And he says, hey, stop that. And then music plays in the background. And they look at him and they're like, hey, who are you to tell us to stop fighting? Are you just going to kill us like you did that Egyptian guy? He's like, oh no. They found out, and they're like, not long after either, and they know it's me. And so he freaks out, and Pharaoh finds out and decides he's going to kill Moses. And so Moses does what any brave man would do, and he runs away. And he runs off to the land called Midian. And so he's in the land of Midian, hanging out by a well, which is where people back then got waters. Picture a prehistoric sink. And so he's hanging out by the community sink, or the hose, the community hose. He's hanging out by the community hose. And this man's daughters, all 7 of them, he's a shepherd, they come out to get water for their sheep. And then some other shepherds come out, and they are kind of driving away this guy's daughters. And Moses says, hey, don't do that. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Like music plays in the background. And the shepherds leave these daughters alone, and they go home, and they tell their dad all about it. Look, this brave man saved us and gave water to our animals. And he's like, I'm going to give one of you to him to be his wife. That's how things worked back then. Sorry, ladies. And so this guy meets Moses, and one of his daughters marries Moses, and now Moses is hanging out in the land, and now he's a shepherd, and he's herding some sheep. He's running away in the land of Midian, and then something really weird happens. Moses is hanging out with his sheep some 40 years later. He was there for 40 years, away from Egypt. He's out there for a while. He's kind of starting to go a little crazy, maybe. And then a bush lights on fire. And some of you may know where I'm going with the story. God shows up in the bush on fire and he says, hey, Moses, I got something I want you to do. And that is the very normal beginning to our very normal story tonight that we're going to be talking about. God talks to bush. In Exodus chapter 3, we see this happening. And so God is with Moses, and he's like, hey, Moses, I want you to go back to Israel. I want you to go back to Egypt. And I want you to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. I've heard their cries. I've heard what's happening to the people in Egypt, and I'm going to tell you to go and tell them to go. And so Moses begins this dialogue with God back and forth. And that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. We're going to be looking for reasons why we can get off the sidelines. And the first one, in Exodus chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, Moses' first excuse to God as he goes back and forth. It says this, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?' He said, 'But I will,'" and then God says this back to him, "'I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain.'" So Moses starts off his little issue, and he says, "God, listen, I get what you're asking me to do, but I'm nobody. I'm just a farmer. I'm just a shepherd out in the middle of nowhere. No one's going to listen to me. Who am I to go and have this crazy interaction, this crazy story, this crazy life, and rescue the people of Israel?" Now, one, I find this response from Moses kind of funny because he grew up in Pharaoh's house. Like, if anybody is going to have access to Pharaoh and actually be able to go and have a conversation with the ruler of Egypt, it's probably Moses. But his excuse is like, "All right, God, I'm nobody, and so no one's going to listen to me. Who am I to go do this?" And God's first response to Moses when he says this, he says, "I'm going to be with you." The first reason we can get off the sidelines because God is present. We can get off the sidelines because God is present. How many of you guys have had a time maybe with a friend where they were struggling with something and you were trying to like give them advice and stuff and like, "Hey, you should," maybe they were doing something dumb and you were like, "Hey, stop that." Da, 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 da. And the music played in the background and they just looked at you and they're like, "Shut up. I don't want your advice right now. I just want you to be with me." How many of you guys have had that kind of interaction with a friend or somebody? Like, "Hey, I just want you to be with me right now." Or maybe you had a friend telling you advice and you were like, "Shut up. I just want you to hang out with me right now." God tells Moses, "Hey, I'm going to just be present with you. I'm going to go with you while you do this." I had a friend recently. He's just had a rough past month. Like, he's had some things go on in his life, a relationship that didn't work out, and he was kind of struggling with some self-doubt and some different things that he was dealing with. And I went and I hung out with him a couple weeks ago. We were just sitting together in his car for a couple hours, just talking about life and what was going on. And one of the things he said to me as we were interacting was like, "Man, Andy, like, I just needed to be with somebody. So I just needed to hang out with someone. I just needed to have someone to sit with me so I wasn't sitting there by myself in it. I'm glad that you're with me in this. Thank you for being with me." And so God literally says this to Moses. He's like, "Moses, listen, I know you don't feel like you're capable, even though you totally are the person someone should pick to do this job. But I know you don't feel that way. But I'm going to be with you. I'm going to go with you as you do this." The second reason we can get off the sidelines, skip forward a little bit. So Moses is continuing, though, to have this back and forth with God. He's not convinced. He says, "Okay." Then Moses answered in chapter 4, verse 1. Then Moses answered, "But behold, God, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" Okay, this one's kind of fair. I'm not going to lie. He's like, "Hey, if I go tell them that a bush talked to me and they should let their 2 million slaves go, they're going to go, 'No, a bush did not talk to you. That didn't happen.' But the Lord said to him this, God says this, 'What is that in your hand?' And Moses said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent or a snake. And Moses ran away from it." So Moses looks at God, and he says, "God, listen, they're not going to believe me. When I tell them a bush talked to me and said, 'Hey, let my people go,' they're going to say, 'No, I don't believe you.'" And so God looks back at Moses, and he says, "Moses, what do you have in your hand there?" And he's like, "I have a stick." And Moses says, "Take your stick and throw it on the ground." And so he does. Boom. And it turns into a snake. And he does what I would do in that situation, and he runs away. How many of you guys were here a few weeks ago when we did one of our outdoor worship nights, and I talked about the snakes that were biting all the Israelite people? And like they were like dying left and right, and it was crazy. I don't know, maybe it was one of those snakes. You never know. But it turns into a snake, and Moses freaks out. And then God goes on and he says, hey, now go and pick up that snake. And Moses is like, heck no, dude. And God's like, do it. And so Moses grabs the snake by the tail and it turns back into a stick. And he's like, oh, thank you, I'm saved. And God says, now take your hand and put it inside your jacket. And Moses does, and he pulls his hand out and it's covered in leprosy, which is like a super gross skin disease. And Moses is like, I really don't like these tricks. And God says, put it back in your jacket. And he does, and he pulls it out and his hand is normal again. And he says, and if those don't work, then I want you to take a pitcher of water from the river and you're going to dump it out on the ground and it's going to be blood. And Moses is like, these are really creepy tricks, God. I feel like we could go with something a bit more positive. But God gives him all these signs. He says, listen, I'm going to give you all these different ways to prove that I'm God and that I'm with you. The second reason that we can get off the sidelines is we can get off the sidelines because God is powerful. God is powerful. It's not Moses who was able to turn his staff into a snake. It's not Moses who was able to turn water into blood or any crazy stuff like that. But God says, hey, I'm going to do all of these powerful things to prove to the people that I'm the one who sent you.
And we had a bit of a technical difficulty, but it's okay. We've still got the rest of the content for you guys. I'm going to finish up kind of our talk from this past week when we met for High School Impact. So, talking about we can get off the sidelines because God is powerful, that part too, right? And so as I was talking to this friend of mine and having this conversation and we're processing through these things together, one of the things that we began to realize as we talked together was that God doesn't ask us to be capable. He asks us to be confident in him. He asks us to focus on his power and his strength and his ability. And I think we see God doing that right here. Like Moses didn't have the ability to turn a stick into a snake. He didn't have the ability to make his hand leprosy and then make it back. He didn't have the ability to turn water into blood. But God had all of those abilities. God has that power. And so he says, Moses, I'm going to give you these signs. I'm going to give you these wonders. I'm going to give you this power to do these things. It's not going to be about you. It's going to be about me. So God is asking us to step into that with him as well and realize, okay, God, like you're powerful. You've got me taken care of. And then we see the third reason we can get off the sidelines in verses 10 through 15. Now, most people, if they would have had God do all this crazy stuff to them and appear to them in a burning bush, you might think, okay, Moses, maybe you just like listen to God. Like maybe God's proven his point, but not Moses. Moses goes on in verses 10 through 15. It says this, but Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." So Moses jumps back at God and he says, but God, I don't talk good. Well, what I find funny about this excuse for Moses is literally Moses was educated in Pharaoh's palace. Like this guy would have had a better education than pretty much anyone else in that day. He would have been able to communicate just fine. But God responds this way. Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? And who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." So God's response, he's like, listen, Moses, you know what? I made you. I designed you as you are. I've got a plan and a purpose for all of this. I've got it all taken care of. But Moses still. But he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." He's basically just throwing up his hands at this point and being like, okay, God, I really just don't want to go. And then God responds, as you might expect. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do." So Moses just continually comes with these excuses, and God basically says, you know what, Moses? I made you. I designed you. In fact, I even know about your brother, and I'm going to have him come out and meet you. I know that he's a good communicator, and I'm going to teach you guys what to say. Guys, the third reason that we can get off the sidelines is God is purposeful. Because God is purposeful. God's like, Moses, I've got a plan. I know all this stuff. I have got it all figured out. You don't need to worry about this. I'm going to take care of it. Guys, one of the things that I realized as I was having these conversations with my friend and as we were having these conversations together is that all this stuff that was coming up in his life that he was struggling with and sitting in, we actually talked a little bit about this passage together.
it was all bringing things up in him that he hadn't even realized. Stuff, doubts that he was having, struggles that he was having, and it was allowing him to recognize that God was going to use these situations he was in to help him deal with even some stuff from his past that he hadn't dealt with yet. And so even in the midst of all of this hardship that he was going through, God had an incredible purpose through it all. He knew that he needed me to be there with him as a friend, and that we needed to spend that time together. Like, God was working in the midst of all of that. So that's the third reason we can get off the sidelines, is because God is purposeful. Now I want to ask you guys, what do you see that is in common with every excuse that Moses gave God? He says, God, who am I to go do this? Oh, but God, they're not going to listen to me. I'm not going to be able to communicate that to them. Oh, God, I'm not a good speaker. God, I don't want to go. I don't think I'm good enough for this. Every single excuse that Moses gives to God is about Moses. And every answer God gives back is about God. God says, Moses, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to give you these signs and wonders. I have a plan. I'm going to organize this. I made you. God's like, Moses, it's not about you. It's about me. I think that God is often saying that to us as well. He says, listen, it's not about you, Andy. It's about me, God, and my ability to do things in you and through you. Guys, really, that's our main idea for tonight. If I can take you actually back. So we looked tonight at basically interaction excuses 1, 3, and 4. But I want to take you back to number 2 because I think it's the big one. I think it's the one that really is kind of the focal point of this whole interaction between God and Moses. It's in chapter 3, verses 13 through 15. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And guys, this is so, so cool. I love God's response. And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. So God looks back at Moses. He says, Moses, I am all things. Like, I am the God. I am, the big kahuna. Like, I'm the one in charge of it all. You tell them that I am sent you. Tell them the God of the universe sent you. It's one of my favorite names for God in all of Scripture. The name he gives himself, I am. Guys, really, ultimately, the main idea, the reason we can get off the sidelines of our faith and be all in our faith as we look into this series this fall is because God is. Because God is. Because he is the I am. Because it's not about us and it's about him. It's about his strength, his presence, his purposes, his power. He is all things, and we don't have to, it doesn't have to be about us. It's not about our lack of excitement or passion or our inability to do things or our lack of discipline. All of those things we can put in God's hands and say, God, I know it's not about me, it's about you, and I want to trust you with this. I want to trust you with this process. It's about him. So be encouraged by that, guys, and be looking forward to our life group discussions that are going to be coming up this week, whether you're meeting in person in host homes or online. I am so excited to dive deeper into this passage together and discuss some things with you. I think it's going to be a really good time. We'll see you soon.